There's a silent lie that many men learn from a young age. They say that if you're kind to everyone, understanding with everyone, and always seek approval from those around you, the world will reward you. It sounds nice. It even sounds morally correct. But when you start to observe reality carefully, the reality that Machiavelli studied with such precision, you realize something uncomfortable. Men who try to be loved by everyone almost never achieve real power, respect, or freedom. In fact, the opposite often happens. The more someone tries to please, the more predictable, manipulable, and easily replaceable they become. This happens because the world doesn't function solely based on good intentions. It functions through decisions guided by reality, not by ideals. Now think about something simple. How many times have you seen someone extremely competent being ignored, while another person, less prepared but more strategic, advances rapidly? How many times does a professional accept less than they deserve just to avoid conflict? Or how many times does someone fail to set boundaries because they are afraid of seeming too harsh? The truth is that there is an invisible cost to trying to be loved by everyone. A cost that appears in the respect you receive, the opportunities that arise, and even in how people treat your presence. That's why strategic thinkers throughout history have reached an uncomfortable but profoundly true conclusion. At many points in life, it's better to be feared than loved, as long as you know how to avoid being hated. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Not about cruelty, nor about cheap manipulation, but about something much deeper: how to develop the strategic mindset that allows a man to walk through the world with respect, autonomy, and clarity. We will explore principles involving virtù and fortuna, the calculated use of force, reputation building, information control, and leadership based on real human nature. By understanding these ideas, you begin to see something that few perceive: the invisible game that defines who is respected and who is ignored. And once you begin to see this game, it's impossible to look at the world the same way again. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now, not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. There's a very popular idea in the modern world that seems beautiful at first glance, that always being kind, always understanding, and always good is a virtue that will naturally be rewarded. However, when a person begins to observe the world through the eyes of someone like Machiavelli, they realize something curious. Reality works a little differently. Life, in many moments, follows a policy guided by reality, not by ideals. And in this reality, there's something that almost no one explains clearly. There's an invisible tax on naive compassion. Whenever someone avoids negotiating because they're afraid of seeming too harsh, whenever they accept less than they deserve to avoid conflict, whenever they say it's okay when in fact it's not okay, they are paying this silent tax. Little by little, this begins to affect everything: people's respect, the value of their work, and even the opportunities that arise. Not because the world is cruel by nature, but because human nature responds to signals. And one of the strongest signals of low status is precisely the inability to defend one's own interests. Think of something simple from everyday life. Imagine a professional who charges $500 for a service, but when the client asks for a discount, They immediately reply, "Oh, okay, you can pay $350. It seems like a gesture of kindness." But what happens in the other person's mind? They learn two things. First, that professional probably doesn't believe that much in the value of their own work. Second, they are easy to pressure. And here comes one of the oldest observations of human strategy, something that appears repeatedly in reflections associated with virtù and fortuna. Those who do not protect their own value end up training the world to devalue them. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or hostile. It means understanding that there is a balance between cordiality and firmness. A lawyer who charges fair fees, a doctor who respects their own time, or an entrepreneur who doesn't accept any poorly constructed proposal are simply practicing decisions based on real human nature. They know that often the appearance of excessive generosity ends up being interpreted as weakness, and this completely changes the power dynamic in any relationship. Now consider something even more interesting. Many people believe that to be respected, they must always be agreeable. But history shows a curious paradox. In many leadership contexts, it's better to be feared than loved, as long as one knows how to avoid being hated. This doesn't mean acting cruelly. It means that true respect is born when people perceive clear boundaries. A manager who never says no becomes a hostage of their own team. An entrepreneur who tries to please all clients ends up accepting bad projects. A professional who fears displeasing others always ends up overworked and underpaid. Gradually, they realize something uncomfortable. The world rewards those who know how to set boundaries more. This is part of the calculated use of force in everyday life. Not physical force, but the force of positioning. And when someone begins to understand this, an inevitable question arises. If being excessively kind can be so costly, then what is the balance between empathy and strategy? It is precisely at this point that the transformation begins that leads to the next stage of this journey. After a man realizes the invisible cost of trying to please everyone, something inside him begins to change. It's not a noisy transformation, it's almost silent. He begins to understand that professional life, and often financial life, demands a type of posture that may seem cold to those who still live only in the realm of intentions. This is where a mentality that many call corporate psychopath emerges. Of course, not in the literal sense of the word. It's not about gratuitous cruelty or a lack of humanity. It's about developing strategic coldness in decisions, like a surgeon who needs to make a precise incision to save a patient. A surgeon cannot hesitate because he is afraid of seeming harsh. He needs to act with clarity. Something similar happens in the business world. Those who build power learn early on that politics guided by reality, not ideals, is the rule of the game. Decisions are rarely comfortable. They often involve firing someone, canceling a project, or abandoning an idea that seemed promising. And that's exactly where the mental discipline that Machiavelli observed comes in, the ability to separate emotion from strategy. Here's a simple example that happens in companies every day. Imagine an entrepreneur who started a small business with 3 friends. At first, everything seems great: friendship, enthusiasm, shared dreams. But over time, he realizes that one of the partners isn't delivering results. He arrives late, avoids responsibilities, and even creates conflicts. The average person faces an emotional dilemma. But he's my friend, I can't do that. Someone who understands the logic of virtù and fortuna sees the situation differently. He asks, which decision protects the future of the business? Because in the end justifies the means when the goal is to preserve something greater. A strategic leader doesn't make decisions driven by guilt. He makes decisions based on real human nature. This means understanding that people, like projects, constantly need to prove their worth. And when they don't, leadership requires the courage to act. Interestingly, when someone develops this kind of posture, something interesting happens. People around them begin to see them differently. They start to convey an aura of firmness, that feeling that their decisions cannot be manipulated by drama or emotional pressure. This creates a powerful psychological effect: respect. There's no need to raise your voice. There's no need to act aggressively. It's enough to demonstrate consistency. This is the essence of the appearance of virtue, combined with the calculated use of force. Whoever masters this balance becomes predictable in one thing. Their decisions follow clear criteria, and when this happens, something even more important begins to emerge: a new power dynamic in negotiations. Because the moment a man learns to act with strategic coldness, he discovers that there is another silent currency circulating in the world, a currency called fear. And understanding how this economy works is exactly what opens the doors to the next stage of this transformation. After a man learns to make decisions with strategic coldness, he begins to perceive an invisible force that governs much of human relations: the economy of fear. It sounds harsh, but one only needs to observe the world carefully to notice a pattern. People respect boundaries, people respect consequences, and people often only value what they can lose. It was precisely this type of observation that led thinkers like Machiavelli to argue that leadership cannot be based solely on sympathy or goodwill. In practice, there is a huge difference between being an approachable person and being a predictably manipulable person. Those who are always available, always ready to say yes, always ready to negotiate against themselves, end up sending a clear signal to the environment. There are no real consequences to exceeding their limits. And when there are no consequences, people's behavior changes rapidly. Therefore, one of the most powerful forms of leadership is to become what some strategists call a man of consequences, someone whose decisions carry weight, whose words have value, and whose limits are real. A practical example helps to understand this clearly. Imagine a consultant who serves clients. At the beginning of their career, they answer messages at any time of day, accept last-minute meetings, reduce prices whenever someone asks for a discount, and even strive to appear extremely available. It seems like dedication. But little by little, something happens. Clients begin to treat them as a cheap resource. Now compare this to another professional. This second consultant answers messages at set times, has a limited schedule, charges the full price for the service, and doesn't hesitate to reject bad proposals. Curiously, people begin to value them more. Why? Because they created scarcity, and scarcity completely alters the dynamics of negotiation. This is where a strategic principle linked to virtù and fortuna appears. Those who have options never need to beg for opportunities. This also connects with the famous principle that it is better to be feared than loved, as long as one knows how to avoid being hated. Respect is born when people know that you can walk away from a negotiation without despair. This is one of the biggest turning points in the mindset of someone who decides to take control of their own life. They realize that power doesn't come from convincing everyone. Power comes from the ability to walk away when something doesn't make sense. An investor who rejects bad deals, a professional who doesn't accept unfair salaries, or an entrepreneur who ends a toxic partnership is exercising exactly what Machiavelli would call the calculated use of force. It's not aggression, it's posture. It's a silent way of showing that their decisions follow clear criteria and are based on real human nature. And when someone starts living this way, a new question naturally arises: how to ensure that no single person, company, or circumstance has enough power to corner you. It is precisely at this point that an even more powerful strategy comes into play: the logic of the Hydra. When a man learns not to beg for opportunities and understands the logic of scarcity, he begins to see another powerful truth. Depending on a single source of income is like walking a tightrope without a safety net. It seems stable until the day something happens. A boss changes, a client disappears, a company closes, a market goes into crisis. And suddenly, the entire castle, built with so much effort, begins to shake. It was by observing human nature and power dynamics that strategists throughout history realized something interesting. Real freedom almost always arises from the diversification of power. That is precisely why the metaphor of the Hydra, that mythological creature that grew two heads for everyone that was cut off, became such a powerful image to explain anti-fragility. A strategically prepared man does not live with only one open door. He builds several, because he understands that virtù and fortuna go hand in hand, skill and circumstance. And when circumstances change, those who possess multiple sources of stability continue to advance. Think of something simple and extremely practical. Imagine a professional who depends exclusively on the salary from a single job. He wakes up every day knowing that if that job disappears, all his financial stability disappears with it. Now compare that to someone who has built 3 or 4 different income streams. It could be a main job, a small investment in stocks, income from digital content, or even a side business. This person negotiates with much more peace of mind because he is not trapped. This is a practical application of decisions based on real human nature. Those who have alternatives never negotiate in a position of desperation. For example, someone might gradually invest in solid companies, such as broad market ETFs, shares of consistent companies, or even rental properties. Others build income through knowledge, consulting, courses, digital channels, or specialized services. The central point is not the specific form, but the mindset. A strategist understands that depending too much on a single structure creates vulnerability. And it is precisely at this point that Machiavelli's philosophy finds a curious parallel with the modern world. Throughout history, leaders who maintained their own loyal armies were far more stable than those who depended solely on external forces. In today's world, these armies can be interpreted as your skills, your networks, your investments, and your multiple sources of income. Each new source reduces the power of control that any person or situation can exert over you. This creates something extremely valuable, strategic tranquility. Not the tranquility of naivete, but the quiet calm of someone who knows they cannot be easily overthrown. And when someone begins to live this way, something interesting happens. People begin to notice a change in their posture. They don't negotiate desperately, they don't accept just any proposal, and they don't bow down easily. Gradually, a new perception emerges around them. A different reputation begins to take shape. And it is precisely this reputation that leads to the next stage of this journey. When a man builds true independence, financial, emotional, and strategic, something curious begins to happen around him. People start to observe him differently. Not necessarily with fear, but with a certain caution. He ceases to be seen as someone easy to manipulate. And at that moment, something extremely powerful in the social game is born: reputation. Many men try to build a reputation through charm, trying to please everyone. But when we analyze the world through Machiavelli's lens, we perceive a different dynamic. In many contexts, a reputation for being demanding, selective, and even a little ruthless can act as a natural filter. This happens because people with low commitment tend to avoid environments where they know they will need to deliver results. Ambitious, disciplined, and competent people, on the other hand, are naturally attracted to high standards. This is where that classic logic reappears. It is better to be feared than loved, as long as one knows how to avoid being hated. The secret lies in the balance between firmness and justice. Observe the behavior of some highly respected leaders or entrepreneurs. Many of them are known for being extremely demanding. They don't accept constant delays, they don't tolerate mediocrity, and they rarely lower their standards to accommodate weakness. At first glance, this may seem excessively harsh, but in practice, this type of posture creates something very valuable: clarity. Imagine two companies. In the first, nobody knows exactly what the expected standard is. Mistakes are tolerated indefinitely. Decisions are confusing, and leadership avoids confrontation. In the second, the rules are clear. Those who deliver results grow. Those who don't need to improve or leave. Interestingly, the second company tends to attract much more prepared professionals, because competent people like environments where merit is valued. This connects directly to decisions based on real human nature. A leader who maintains high standards is practicing a calculated use of force, not to oppress, but to organize. Of course, there's a fundamental point that many ignore. A reputation for high standards only works when it's backed by genuine competence. Otherwise, it becomes mere empty arrogance. This is where the logic of virtù and fortuna comes in again. Virtù represents skill, discipline, and real ability. Fortuna represents circumstances and opportunities. When these two things go hand in hand, someone's reputation naturally becomes solid. A highly competent professional can charge high prices, demand respect, and set clear boundaries because their delivery justifies it. A doctor who has studied deeply, a lawyer who masters their field, or an entrepreneur who has built concrete results can maintain this stance with ease. This is also a way to preserve the appearance of virtue, something Machiavelli understood very well. Reputation is not only what you are, but also what the world perceives. And when someone begins to consolidate this image of strength and competence, a new strategic need arises, because maintaining high standards requires something even more difficult: the ability to discard without hesitation everything that no longer grows. After a man builds a reputation, independence, and high standards, he discovers a truth few people dare to face. Growing requires learning to discard, not just material things, but also ideas, projects, habits, and even people who are no longer moving in the same direction. This is one of the most difficult aspects of strategic maturity, because for many people, abandoning something seems like failure. But those who observe the world through Machiavelli's logic understand something different. Life is not a straight line of perfect decisions. It is a continuous process of constant adaptability, where what was useful yesterday can become a burden tomorrow. This is precisely why ancient strategists argued that leadership requires brutal clarity regarding what should remain and what needs to be removed, not out of malice, but for survival. After all, politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires the courage to recognize when something has simply stopped working. Consider an extremely common example in the business world. An entrepreneur creates a product and spends years trying to make it work. They invest time, money, and energy, but the results remain mediocre. Many people, trapped by pride or emotional attachment, continue to persist simply because they have already invested too much to give up. This phenomenon is known in economics as sunk cost. A strategist, however, thinks differently. They coldly analyze, does this still have real potential, or am I just feeding a dead idea? This type of thinking reflects decisions based on real human nature. Great investors do this all the time. If a company ceases to have solid fundamentals, they sell their position. Great leaders do this too. If a project doesn't grow, it's shut down. This is the kind of stance that represents the calculated use of force, not against people, but against the inertia that tries to keep failed structures alive. This discipline also applies to personal life. Sometimes, a man needs to abandon habits that were silently draining his energy. It could be excessive social media use, friendships that are constantly in drama, or even commitments that add no value whatsoever. Throughout history, leaders who prospered have understood something essential. Time and energy are strategic resources. Spending them on things that don't grow is like keeping soldiers standing still in battles that have already been lost. Therefore, the logic of virtù and fortuna appears again. Virtù represents the ability to act with courage and discipline. Fortuna represents the opportunities that arise when space is created. And when a man learns to remove everything that is rotting in his life, something curious happens. He begins to have much more mental clarity. This clarity leads him to perceive another type of power, even more silent, a power that few truly master. The power to control what he reveals and what he keeps silent. There's a point in the evolution of a strategic man when he realizes something profoundly counterintuitive. The more he talks about his plans, the less power he has over them. It seems strange at first, because modern culture encourages the exact opposite. People are encouraged to tell everything: objectives, ideas, goals, projects, gains, difficulties. But when someone begins to observe human behavior with Machiavelli's clarity, they realize an important detail. Information is power, and those who distribute power carelessly end up losing advantage without realizing it. That's why ancient strategists always valued something called the fortress of silence. It doesn't mean living in hiding or becoming mysterious out of vanity. It means understanding that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires control over what is revealed to the world. Because the moment you explain all your moves, you become predictable, and predictability is an invitation to manipulation. Observe how this plays out in everyday life. Imagine someone who always tells all their friends about every new plan that comes up. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to change careers. I'm going to invest in this. I'm going to do that. Often, even before starting, they've already heard 20 different opinions. Some are well-intentioned, others are laden with fear, envy, or skepticism. Little by little, that idea that could have been executed with clarity begins to dissolve into doubt. Now compare that to someone who works in silence. They research, study, test, and execute without announcing each step. When the results appear, people are surprised. This behavior reflects something deeply aligned with decisions based on real human nature. Because the truth is simple: opinions are cheap, but execution is rare. That's why great strategists understand the value of the appearance of virtue, seeming calm, balanced, and ordinary, while their real decisions happen under the radar. A practical example of this can be seen in experienced investors. Many of them don't disclose their strategies while building market positions. They study companies, analyze data, and make decisions quietly. Only after the strategy is consolidated does the world notice the move. This represents a modern application of the calculated use of force, acting at the right moment without revealing all your cards prematurely. This type of posture also protects something extremely valuable: your freedom to adapt. When few people know your plans, you can adjust them without external pressure. This is deeply linked to the concept of virtù and fortuna, where skill and circumstance meet. Those who speak less observe more. Those who observe more understand the game better. And when a man begins to master this strategic silence, something inevitable happens. Some people begin to distrust, criticize, or even show resentment, because silent success often awakens emotions that few admit aloud. And dealing with this requires a different kind of strength, the ability to remain firm even in the face of envy or disapproval. When a man begins to live with discipline, strategic silence, and independence, an inevitable reaction begins to arise around him. Not everyone will applaud. Some will admire him silently, it's true, but others will react with something quite different: discomfort. This happens because success, especially when it's visible, tends to activate deep emotions in people: comparison, frustration, resentment, and even envy. And here comes one of the most realistic observations about human nature, something that thinkers like Machiavelli understood with enormous clarity. Trying to be loved by everyone is an impossible mission. The more someone grows, the more opinions arise around them. Therefore, those who decide to build power need to develop something essential: immunity to hatred. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or despising people. It means stopping the search for universal approval, because the moment someone tries to please all groups, they end up weakening their own decisions. And leadership demands exactly the opposite: decisions based on real human nature, not on emotional expectations. Consider something that frequently happens in professional or business environments. Imagine a manager who decides to implement higher standards for their team. Before that, the environment was relaxed. Deadlines were ignored, results were mediocre, and no one felt pressured to improve. When they start demanding discipline and performance, part of the team reacts positively. These are the people who want to grow. But another part starts to complain. Comments like, "He changed," "He became too strict, and it wasn't like this before," arise. This reaction doesn't necessarily mean the decision was wrong. Often it's just a natural reflection of a power shift within the group. This type of situation well illustrates the logic of politics guided by reality, not ideals. A leader needs to accept that any important decision generates different reactions. And in this context, that famous maxim returns: it's better to be feared than loved, as long as you know how to avoid being hated. In other words, respect must exist, even if approval isn't universal. To deal with this, a strategic man learns something very important: the difference between useful criticism and emotional noise. Constructive criticism helps improve decisions. Attacks motivated by envy or insecurity, on the other hand, usually say more about the critic than about the actor. Great entrepreneurs, athletes, and leaders frequently experience this. Just observe well-known figures in the world of business or innovation. The greater the impact they produce, the greater the volume of opinions surrounding them. In this scenario, true strength lies in maintaining focus on one's own path, guided by virtù and fortuna, personal skill combined with well-seized opportunities. This type of posture requires emotional maturity and also a certain level of detachment. Because, in the end, group approval can never be the main decision criterion. And when someone reaches this level of mental independence, an even deeper reflection arises. If power requires firmness, then what is the limit between necessary leadership and unnecessary cruelty? When a man begins to understand the mechanisms of power, strategic silence, independence, a strong reputation, and immunity to criticism, an inevitable question arises: how far should this firmness go? Because there is a very delicate line between necessary leadership and gratuitous cruelty. And it is precisely at this point that what we can call the ethics of power comes in. Contrary to what many think, thinkers like Machiavelli did not advocate wickedness as a virtue. What they observed was something more realistic. Governing people, leading teams, or building something great requires difficult decisions. Sometimes these decisions do not please everyone. But there is a fundamental difference between acting with unnecessary brutality and acting with rigor to preserve order and progress. A mature leader understands that politics guided by reality, not by ideals, requires moral clarity. It is not about crushing people. It is about protecting structures that allow everyone to prosper. And this requires courage to make decisions that many would prefer to avoid. Imagine, for example, a manager who realizes that an employee is harming the entire team. This employee creates conflict, delivers little, and negatively impacts the work environment. An inexperienced leader might try to avoid the situation indefinitely, hoping the problem will disappear on its own. However, someone who acts with decisions based on real human nature understands that inaction also has consequences. Sometimes, protecting the group requires making an unpopular decision, like firing someone who doesn't fit the team's standards. This may seem harsh at first glance, but in practice, this decision can save the productivity and morale of the entire team. This is where the logic of the calculated use of force comes in. It's not emotional violence, it's responsibility. A doctor removes a tumor to save the body. A leader removes problems to preserve the organization. And when this is done fairly, clearly, and with transparent criteria, respect tends to grow. This type of leadership also demands something many ignore: self-control. Because power without control quickly transforms into tyranny, true strength lies in knowing when to act and when to restrain oneself. This discipline is deeply linked to the concept of virtù and fortuna. Virtù represents the skill, intelligence, and emotional mastery necessary to govern well. Fortuna represents the circumstances that change throughout life. Those who understand this dynamic know that power is not a license to abuse, but a constant responsibility to maintain balance. This is why great leaders throughout history were concerned not only with winning, but with maintaining legitimacy, because in the end, avoiding being hated remains essential for any lasting power structure. And when a man finally understands this balance, firmness without cruelty, strategy without inhumanity, he begins to realize that all the previous lessons were preparing something greater: the complete transformation of his own identity. After going through all these stages, learning not to pay the tax of naive compassion, developing strategic coldness, understanding the economics of fear, building independence like a hydra, maintaining reputation, discarding what doesn't grow, mastering silence, and resisting hatred, something begins to solidify within a man. It's no longer an isolated technique. It's not a social trick. It's a transformation of identity. He stops acting this way only at specific moments and begins to live this way naturally. This is the point that many strategists throughout history have considered the most powerful stage, when strategy and personality become one and the same. It was precisely this type of man that thinkers like Machiavelli observed when studying effective leaders. They weren't acting all the time. They had internalized a way of thinking based on decisions guided by reality, not by ideals. In other words, their choices were already aligned with the logic of the real world. This completely changes how someone walks through life. An integrated man doesn't need to constantly prove his strength. He doesn't engage in unnecessary arguments, doesn't react to every provocation, and doesn't live trying to convince others of his worth. His posture speaks for itself. This happens because he has deeply understood the relationship between virtù and fortuna. He knows that personal skill, discipline, and strategic reading of the environment create opportunities over time. An experienced investor who studies companies before investing money, a professional who develops rare skills instead of relying solely on luck, or an entrepreneur who builds solid networks of relationships is applying exactly this principle. There is no desperation in decisions. There is calculation. There is long-term vision. And there is something even more powerful: tranquility. Because those who have built multiple power structures, knowledge, reputation, resources, and relationships rarely need to act impulsively. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of this final stage is the inner balance that begins to emerge. An integrated man doesn't need to choose between being human and being strategic. He learns to combine the two. He can be respectful, but not naive. He can be firm, but not cruel. He can be ambitious, but without losing awareness of the impact of his decisions. This is the true meaning of outwardly virtuous behavior combined with the calculated use of force. Outwardly, he appears merely calm, centered, and confident. Inwardly, there is an extremely clear system of thought about how the world works. And when someone reaches this point, they realize something curious. Many of the battles that once seemed gigantic simply cease to exist. Because now he doesn't react to the world. He understands it. And when a man deeply understands human nature, his way of acting becomes much more precise. It's as if all the pieces finally fit together, revealing a complete vision of the game that few truly see. Now stop for a moment and think honestly. How many decisions in your life were truly guided by your strategy? And how many were guided by the fear of displeasing someone? How many opportunities did you let pass because you wanted to keep the peace with everyone? And how many times did you accept less than you deserved just to avoid conflict? These questions may seem uncomfortable, but they are exactly the kind of reflection that separates those who live reacting to the world from those who begin to understand the game of life clearly. Because when you observe reality carefully, the reality that Machiavelli described with such precision, you realize something fundamental. Respect rarely arises from trying to please everyone. It arises from the combination of virtù and fortuna, of real skill combined with the courage to act strategically. Starting today, begin to look at your decisions differently. Ask yourself, am I doing this out of conviction or out of fear of disapproval? Am I protecting my worth or am I paying the invisible tax of trying to please everyone? Small changes can generate enormous transformations. It could be learning to negotiate your work better. It could be setting clear boundaries with people who overstep those boundaries. It could be investing in developing rare skills or creating new sources of income to build independence. All of this is part of living with decisions based on real human nature and not just social expectations. When you start acting this way, something interesting happens. Your posture changes, your reputation changes, and the opportunities that arise around you also begin to change. Now I want to ask you a direct question. Do you prefer to continue living the way most people live, trying to please everyone and being easily replaceable? Or are you willing to develop the mindset of someone who builds respect, autonomy, and power over time? Write in the comments. Which of these ideas resonated with you the most today? I really want to know. And if this type of content makes sense to you, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications, because here we explore in-depth strategies about power, human behavior, and mindset that few people have the courage to discuss openly. Because ultimately, understanding these ideas isn't just about knowledge, it's about transforming the way you play the game of life.